So, welcome to 6th grade science and aerospace engineering. A little bit about myself. My name is Justin Hoskins. I'd really appreciate it if you'd address me as Mr. Hoskins. This is my 4th year teaching in the classroom. Before this, I was a high school teacher and I taught science as well. I love science. I feel it's the only subject that produces new and current information and discoveries every day. There's always something new in science, so it's really cool. I've been married for 13 years and I have 2 children. Both of my children will be attending Compass Rose, one at Ingenuity and one at Legacy. Some of the things that I like to do, I like to go camping, I like to go fishing, I like doing yard work, just spending time with my family. When I can, I ride motorcycles and things like that. So a little bit about myself, and if you have any questions for me about myself or you want to know any more, here's a good time to ask. All right, so now what I want you to do, I'd like you to tell me about you. All right, so introduce yourself, use the chat box, and just try to answer these couple things, What's your name? What are you excited about for this year? What are you not so excited about? And a fun fact about yourself, something that you would be like, oh, cool, I'd really like you to know this about me. If you can't do it in the chat box, you can also answer the questions in the discussion post. There's a discussion post posted in Google Classroom. So I'd like you to try to do that. All right, so computer and online expectations. So what do I expect from you while we're doing our class time? During the lesson or while I'm speaking, please have your microphone on mute. This will allow me to get the information out to everybody without disruption. Use appropriate language. When you do not get a chance to not talk or you're trying to type in the chat box, please make sure you're being appropriate and using appropriate language. Make sure that you can mute and unmute your microphone pretty easily. When I'm asking questions, I'd like you to be able to make sure that if I call your name, you can answer. All right? Get familiar with how to turn on this mic pretty quickly, and that way there's not a lot of lag time in between questions and answering. Raise your hand so that you can get noticed. For right now, I'd just like you to raise your hand, and that way I can acknowledge you, or type your question in the chat box, and I'll be able to get back with you. All right, so at this time, what I'd like to do, let's take a minute, 30 seconds, and I'd like you to just kind of get used to muting and unmuting your microphone. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so more expectations. Use appropriate body language during the call as well. So while we're online, make sure that you're not making funny faces, you're not doing anything inappropriate. Make sure that you are acting as you would if you were in class and appropriately. All right, your camera should always be on, while appropriate. Make sure that I can see you. During the whole class, I expect to be able to see you. If you could, I would like to know, why do you think you should have your camera on? So let's take a second, 30 seconds, put in the comment box, why do you think that your camera should always be on during class time? All right, so last thing with the computer expectations. All right, work somewhere there's plenty of light and a place that's appropriate for learning. So laying in your bed while we're doing class is probably not an appropriate place. You cannot get too distracted. So make sure you're at like a kitchen table, a desk, or just a small table somewhere that's relatively quiet. Ensure to the best of your ability that the background noise and the visuals are minimalized. What I mean by visuals is make sure there's not TV playing in the background, make sure that you don't have a bunch of toys laying around and all that kind of stuff. Things that make it seem that you're in almost like a classroom environment to the best of your ability. All right? So, what should your uniforms be? Well, for the first 3 weeks, uniforms should be worn if you have them. If you don't have your uniform, make sure that your clothes are school appropriate. This to include your shirt and your pants. So no inappropriate language or symbols or gestures on your shirt. Your pants or shorts should not have any holes in them. They should not be ripped. They should not have tears in them. And they should be something that you can work in and not get distracted. All right. Now, beginning September 8th, Tentatively, which means that's what we're aiming for, we're hoping everybody will have their uniforms. So this means you're going to have your polo shirt that has the Compass Rose insignia on it, and you're going to be wearing some sort of khaki shorts or khaki pants, all school appropriate, as well as a belt. If we're in person, you're going to need to make sure that you have your mask as well. All right, so are there any kind of questions or anything like that? Let's take 30 seconds. And I'd also like you to type in the chat box an example of an appropriate shirt and kind of let me know when are uniforms expected. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so these are what your grades are going to look like. And you need to know this because we all want to grow and we all want to get better and make sure that our performance is at the top of our game. So what should you expect? You should expect 2 grades per week. This would be 2 grades either coming from a science grade or an aerospace engineering grade. This is going to include anything from homework to tests to participation grades. The grade breakdown, so 60% of your overall grade is going to come from your classwork and homework. So this would be any kind of homework assignment, any kind of in-class assignment, exit tickets, things like that. 30% of your grade is going to come from your tests and assessments. So make sure that we know that. And then 10% of your grades are going to be participation grades, which would be like our discussion questions like I posted on our Google Classroom, or it's going to be activities that we do doing the best you can and that you're actually participating. So at this time, I'd like to ask you a couple questions. So in the chat box, please put what percentage of your grade will be from homework, and then how much of your grade comes from your test scores. So go ahead and do that now. All right, and lastly, what are questions that you might have for me? I'm pretty open, so as long as it's an appropriate question, feel free to ask. You can do this by writing it down in the chat box, or raise your hand, and once you're acknowledged, take your microphone off mute, and I'll give you a chance to answer the questions. So go ahead and feel free to ask me some questions.